If you found this podcast, chances are you're a high achiever and you're successful. But now you're stuck and stressed, and you realize that everything you've created hasn't given you the fulfillment and the joy you thought it would. This is where we discuss the keys of high performance mindset and stepping into the next best version of yourself. Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast, where we bring you stories to inspire you and strategies to help you tap into your potential and become your best self. Today's guest is from an exclusive group. Out of all the humans who have ever lived in the history of the world, only about 750 people have ever been to space, and he's one of them. Not only is he an astronaut, he's the 19th Black astronaut and the first Jamaican American astronaut to travel to space. He's also been a trailblazer for Black leadership in aerospace through co-founding the Black Leaders in Aerospace Scholarship Training Program known as BLAST. He's also a rocket scientist, a speaker, and was a leader at Virgin Galactic, where he's helping shape the future of commercial spaceflight and pursuing the impossible. Christopher Huie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ian. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. I am so excited to talk to you about space, about your journey, and all the things in between. But for our listeners and viewers who may not be familiar with the work that Virgin Galactic does and why that is part of space, because for me, Virgin was music, and Virgin was, they have an airline. But what is Virgin Galactic, and why is that important to aerospace?
Virgin Galactic is Richard Branson's commercial human space flight company. He's not all that involved, but he certainly is the founder and has had a vision of travel. Virgin as an experience, as a brand, as a company, has always been about transforming experiences. And so they transformed airline travel, they transformed train travel. And so Richard Branson has always been a major adventurer and a big space enthusiast. So when the opportunity came about for him to figure out how to launch a space company, a space brand, he kind of jumped at the opportunity. So the company was founded back in 2004 out of something called the X Prize. It was a competition very similar to the Spirit of St. Louis challenge, where Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic. Mm-hmm. So it was a prize to inspire entrepreneurs and engineers and innovators to figure out how to commercialize space flight. Like back in the early 2000s, the only institutions that ever sent anybody to space were governments. It's really hard, it's really expensive, it's really dangerous. There's a lot to figure out. And so the prize was any company that could send the same vehicle to space twice in 2 weeks. And that would kind of prove out the commercial viability of doing this and opening access to space for more people. So in back 2004, a company named Scaled Composites won the prize, led by a very crazy and innovator airplane designer named Burt Rutan. He's got several airplanes in the Smithsonian Museum, and had worked with Richard before designing, planes and different things for all the expeditions. So Richard Branson's a huge adventurer, balloons across the world. He's, tried to sail the English Channel a couple times in different ways. So he's all about doing exceptional adventures. So space was the next version of that. And so that's kind of the story of how Virgin Galactic started. But yeah, it's really about sending normal people to space.
And wow. So, and you're part of that legacy. But I want to talk more about your legacy. And when you talk about transforming experiences, okay, so you're an astronaut. The first astronaut I've ever talked to, first astronaut we've ever had on this show, first rocket scientist we've had on the show. So probably arguably the most intelligent person I've ever had on this show. How does Christopher Huie, who is, I don't know, maybe middle school, elementary school, end up as Christopher Huie, the astronaut rocket scientist of today? I guess what I'm asking is, can you unpack your childhood a little bit and what the journey was from a young man who I imagine, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but given the backdrop behind it looks like a telescope, maybe, had dreams of space, I would imagine, when you were a kid.
I think, when we're kids, a lot of things inspire us. And I think space is one of those things that's almost universally inspirational.
Hmm.
I think, I don't know, I haven't really met anybody who was like, when I was a kid, I thought space was dumb. It's just so cool. It's out there. No one really knows what's going on out there.
Yeah.
It's inspirational. It's a lot of curiosity. And there's a lot of amazing, beautiful things to go learn and discover in space. For me, it was, certain parts of like the hardship kind of informs your journey a little bit as well. And so I grew up in Central Florida, and when the space shuttle program was still alive and well, and launching rockets to space several times a year from Kennedy Space Center,
Hmm.
and I never had a chance to go see a rocket launch at Kennedy Space Center, but I remember just like looking up in the sky at recess, or we go outside when the countdown, or watching it on TV, and it was just a normal part of like my inner circle of just, oh, yeah, rocket launches happen here, and that's just a part of like what life is.
Right.
And so you look outside and you see the rocket, the launch, the space shuttle going up. And then I remember like in the middle of the night, you'd hear the space shuttle coming back down to Earth with like massive sonic booms, and the whole house would shake and be like, all right, sweet, the astronauts are back. So it was always like pervasive in the background of my life.
Hmm.
And then I grew up as a latchkey kid. So my mom worked full time.
Yeah.
I'm in a hospital. So like long 12-hour shifts. I'd basically ride my bike to school. My older sister is about 6 years older than me. So we're kind of too far apart for her to be like really close by. So she was like off in her high school or college days, and I was still like in the elementary, middle school days. So anyways, I spent a good amount of time like kind of latchkeying myself around, and kind of growing up a little bit faster than maybe others. And so a lot of the ways I'd spend my time is watching a lot of documentaries, and watching the Discovery Channel and the Science Channel and the History Channel. And I just became obsessed with like aviation and helicopters. And I watched a lot of Star Trek, obviously. Well, maybe that's not obvious to you guys yet, but I'm a big Star Trek fan.
Who doesn't love Star Trek? Come on.
And yeah, Star Trek: The Next Generation has been like really impactful and inspirational for me, and still to this day informs a lot of like my leadership style, and like where I learned a lot of lessons about like integrity and leadership. So one of the things I say is like anyone can be your mentor, even if that's someone from science fiction. So my parents divorced when I was young, when I was about 2 years old. So my dad lived in New York and we lived in Florida. And so I would fly back and forth between Florida and New York, at least once a year, usually, over summer breaks. And so I was always like that unaccompanied minor on the airplane. If you remember, like way back in the glory days of pre 9/11 travel, where things were a little bit more lavish, a lot more lax. Yep. And it's like, oh, come see the cockpit, meet the pilots. I got my own little Delta astronaut or flight pilot wings.
Yeah.
And so I think, in small but profound ways, aerospace and aviation was like in and around my life. And I just grew a passion for it. Growing up in Central Florida, I did grow up wanting to go to space camp one year. We couldn't afford it. We looked into it and it didn't work out. So we didn't go to space camp. And over time, the dream of kind of going to space, becoming an astronaut, or at least getting more exposure to it, kind of faded away. Not because anything like actively like killed the dream, but there was not a lot of avenues to get there.
Right.
And so it kind of just like fizzled. And I didn't even meet my first engineer until I was like 15 or 16 at a career day in high school. So this whole career path was just something that was pretty foreign to me and my environment. And so it was really just, self-study and self-inspiration that guided me on this path. And when I was probably like 13 or 14, I decided that I wanted to be a helicopter engineer. And so that's the path that I pursued. That's actually how I got into engineering. So I thought helicopters were crazy cool. They can fly up, down, forwards, backwards, left, right. They can even like stop flying in the middle of the air, and just like, what is going on there? How do these flying machines work? Everything else that flies has to move really, really fast, but these things have the ability to like not move at all.
Yeah.
So a lot of different things. It's hard to like pinpoint exactly what's your inspiration, but I think it's just like the environment I grew up in. And I'd say my mom was a major part of it, because I know a lot of parents, especially immigrant parents, grow up with a very specific dream or vision for their children. It's like, you will become a lawyer or a doctor. You will overcome the hardship that I had in my family, and you have to have a high earning degree, and I'm going to force you to go to this school and do all these things. And maybe it's just like the more like laid back, trusting culture of coming from Jamaica and the islands. But my mom was never forceful. She just like really wanted to let me dive into my passions. And and do what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's one exception to that. I was really interested in becoming a fighter pilot because, like, what kid doesn't want to like fly fast in jets?
Right.
And so I was looking into joining a military academy and going to college and joining the Air Force or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very vehemently talking me out of doing that because she's like, I didn't come across the ocean to this country to have you like get shot up in someone else's airplane. So,
Right.
didn't end up joining the military, and I found another path to aerospace. Yeah, there's a lot to work with there, but hopefully that answers a bit of your question.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like speaking of paths and some of them coming to an end, I've heard you talk about, the fact that you were raised by a single mom, the fact that you are Jamaican American, the fact that you were able to get into a STEM program and now you're, an aerospace engineer, that statistically, that's not really supposed to happen. How were you able to overcome the challenges that produce themselves for someone who is a Jamaican American, someone who looks like us, to be able to achieve the things that you've been able to achieve, especially in the aerospace industry, where I can only imagine there are not that many Black or brown faces?
Yeah, absolutely. I look back at my life and try and figure that out. And like, is there anything I can point to that kind of gave me an edge or an advantage? And there's a couple things. One, we didn't grow up with a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
but my mom made it a priority to send me to private school. And not because it was the best academic option for me, although it was a pretty good school,
Mm-hmm.
but it was mostly to like keep me on the straight and narrow, to make sure I didn't get distracted by so many of the things that infiltrate other public schools and kind of be a victim of your circumstance. So that was kind of a way to kind of tailor my environment. I grew up in a very structured, I was basically in Christian private school from K through 12. And so it was a very structured, protected environment that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was one big aspect of like keeping all of the negative temptations away. The other aspect, I think, is I just never grew up with that mindset that there was something I couldn't do. And so I just always assumed that I could do it until I tried it. And so I never really listened to people that tell me I can't do anything. I was like, well, let me just try it or figure it out. And I think it's like that figured out engineer mindset that has kind of pervaded my life's path.
Yeah.
As a kid, I liked to take things apart. Classic, like future engineer, like let's look at the blender and take it apart, see how it works. Let's take apart the vacuum cleaner. How does these circuits work? How do motors work? And I found that I just like to figure stuff out and like looking at it and then see how I can rebuild something out of it. And understanding how things work was really fascinating to me. So I think honestly, it's just shooting for the moon and if you get shot down, like find a new path, but don't be deterred just because you failed. I did fail several times along my path, and that was pretty devastating. So I'm not saying I was like immune to failure or like somehow circumvented it. But I'd say being like, there's so many different things out there that can limit your mindset. Don't do yourself a disservice by having a self-limiting mindset. Like if anyone's going to put limits on you, let the resistance forces of the world limit you, but don't limit yourself first, because that stops you from even trying, and it stops you from proving yourself wrong.
I love that. I wish that, we need to put that on a megaphone and blast that on repeat. It's time to ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized you? Did you know that research shows that nearly 85% of high performers struggle to maintain a performance mindset while juggling the demands of work and personal life? Those who actively prioritize their performance mindset and personal growth are 30% more likely to achieve their goals in business and life. If you're feeling crippling stress and anxiety, or if you're feeling guilty when you take a moment for yourself, or if you're stuck in the grind and feeling burnt out, you're not alone. Many of us yearn for more, but struggle with the fear of being judged or feeling selfish. And you want to step into the next best version of yourself. That's why I created the Rinse Method, which got me from paraplegic to marathon runner. Backed by science-based proven strategies and now customized for high performers like you. If you're stuck and stressed and want clear steps that you can implement today to move forward, make sure you visit thepositivepersistence.com to download our free Rinse PDF. Here's my question is, where does that audacity come from, Christopher? Like, how do you have the audacity to think that you can achieve anything, or that, when people tell you that you can't, you're like, well, let's find out. I'm going to do it anyway. For some people, that is so far from who they are or who they feel they can be. For you, it seems like that was just baked in.
I think maybe some of it comes from like naivety and thinking that I am like everyone else and everyone else is like me. And I think to a certain extent that's true. Like we're all just people.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether you're the CEO of a company or like a world leader or someone sweeping the floor at your local like grocery store, like everyone's just a person, and every person has generally the same issues and hopes and desires. They look different specifically due to your circumstance and experience, but we all want to feel important. We're all scared. We're all afraid of failure. And I just, felt like I was capable of learning new things. So I think that mindset has like continued to serve me because, the ignorance gave me the boldness to pursue things that maybe I probably shouldn't have done or shouldn't have tried. But one thing I've said in the past to certain folks is like, ignorance is a great innovation tool. Like when you don't know how hard it is or like what the path is, sometimes it's better to not know. And I think that's that's why entrepreneurship works. Like if you really knew how hard it was going to be to like bring this idea into the world, you maybe wouldn't even start, because like the headache and the sacrifice that you really have to do to make it work, you might talk yourself out of it before you begin. So I think honestly, some of it's probably due to like ignorance, but I think part of it is just self-curiosity. I'm actually just really curious about like what I'm capable of. And I think I can die peacefully when I fail at something that I really, really wanted to do. That will give me the signal like, hey, I tried everything. I maximized all my potential. I did a bunch of stuff and I was good at a lot of stuff, and I found something that I couldn't do. That is the limit of my potential. I haven't found that thing yet. And so I'm just curious, like all the things I can do, all the things I can learn, how I can apply that knowledge and see how high I can climb and how far I can go. So I think it's maybe like also that self-curiosity like keeps me motivated.
You've mentioned that you've had a lot of failures in the past, and that I would guess would equate to roadblocks. What would you say are some of the... Now, I'm going to go off on a tangent here a little bit, because I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that being an engineer, that you are, I would say, really into processes, I would say, and frameworks and things of that nature.
Fair, yeah.
So with that educated guess, when you run into obstacles or when you run into adversity, what are some of the things that you go to in terms of figuring out how to work around that situation? Or when a door is closed, how do you circumvent that door? And what are some of the steps that you take to do that?
So I think first is like taking a step back and making sure that I understand the goal. Like the goal helps you define success, and you can't really define failure unless you've defined success. And so I think it's also being humble by not believing that you know the exact path to your goal or to what your definition of success is. So you may get to a certain level in your career, whatever your goal may be, but how you get there is going to vary widely based on your own personal path. Mm-hmm. And so when I set out, I already believe that there's multiple solutions to a problem. That's kind of like the core of engineering. There is no one right answer, because every answer is constrained by, time, money, and resources and skill set. And so you come up with the best answer you can given the constraints that you have. And that gives you multiple different solutions to your answer. And so if you fail on one, it just means you have to look at a different solution to your answer. And so I think at first it's just not being deterred by this apparent failure. It's just, okay, that's how we're not going to do it. How do we keep finding a way to do it? Like in engineering school, it's a much more controlled environment where like you're given these really, really hard problems. Like homework assignments are like 3 problems, and it takes you 4 days to do them with 10 of your smartest friends. Like super crazy stuff. And there was one homework assignment that our professor had just written. Mm-hmm. And he actually hadn't worked out the solutions yet. And so we just have this mindset, like every problem is solvable. You just have to like keep working through it. And after working with this problem for like a week, we went to office hours, and he's like, oh yeah, that might not have a solution. Sorry, let me, fix the problem a little bit. And so in this constrained environment, like the homework assignment actually had effectively infinitely many solutions or like no solutions, just the way the math worked out. But I think that that training is you just keep working the problem because there's always a best answer, even if there's not the right answer. And so I could go more into details about like maybe like process systems and frameworks, but I think the high level, it's just knowing that there's more than one way to get there and not being deterred. And it's how you define failure.
That is really interesting to me because I guess what I'm hearing is that the definition that most of us attach to failure is really incorrect. Because most of us feel like when you fail, like you're done, like you have failed to achieve whatever you set out to, and that's it. But listening to what you're saying, it is more not so much that you're done. It is that, well, what I just tried just didn't work and I need to do something else or try another approach.
I think it's like reframing the problem. It's more about how, not if. I tend not to ask if, especially, and that simple, it sounds like a really small thing, but it's actually a really big deal when you're working with teams and trying to overcome a problem, or if you're trying to get people to do something for you that they don't believe they can do or have never thought about, which I think is maybe really on brand for the positive persistence, is pushing past these limits in your mind or other people's mind. And how do you get more results than you think is possible? It's not asking if, it's asking how. Because when you ask if, it's only binary. It's either yes or no. And things that are currently impossible might be possible tomorrow. And so you do yourself a disservice by asking if, because you could be wrong tomorrow when someone else breaks a record or invents a new solution or finds a new, mathematical equation that opens up the universe to us even faster and further, right? So it's not if, it's about how. And when you enter a how phase, you immediately go into like problem solving and brainstorming. One of my mentors, he has this thing called bad brainstorming, and it's a really useful tool because it's about creativity, and it gives you the option to move past limits that you currently believe to be true and in a structured way. And so the thought experiment he goes through is, what would be a way we could immediately reduce the carbon emissions on Earth by half? It's like, well, we know that humans are the biggest emitters of atmospheric carbon. And so like, what if we just, overnight somehow removed half of the humans on the planet? Right. And that's a really bad idea, right? You wouldn't just go like genocide half of the population, but that opens up a new solution space in your mind. Like maybe there's a way to put half of humans underground, or maybe we launch half of the humans off of the Earth. Or maybe everyone wears a respirator and like everything you exhale gets, buried underground. Like it opens up a whole new solution space in your mind that you otherwise wouldn't have thought of. And so it's just about like reframing the problem. Instead of if, it's how. And like hypothetically, even if you come across things that are not possible, you can start to renegotiate the limits of what are currently constraints. It's like, oh yeah, we could do this, but like, oh, there's a federal regulation that says we can't do that. But it's like, well, if you go and understand the federal regulation that says you can't do that, it actually says you can't do this, but you can like wiggle this a little bit and get like 40% of what the regulation says you can't do. And that's how you go find the best solution, by like understanding truly what are the constraints, but don't start with the constraints because that limits your possibilities. And you don't want to limit yourself to begin with. You always want to start with complete freedom.
So complete freedom, and it sounds like you are always operating from like a creative mind. Like there's just growth mindset all the time. And it sounds like we're talking about the realm of possibilities, and we're talking about positive persistence and tapping into your potential and overcoming adversities, that truly the realm of possibilities is endless.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the fun part of solving problems. And for me, being an engineer, but also I just like love solving any problem. It's not necessarily engineering. Like entrepreneurship is just as interesting to me. Taking in information and looking at data, understanding like how to make inferences from it so you can go bring a new idea into life. Super interesting. So yeah, I don't think you serve yourself by having limits. It's just always thinking about how and how to grow. I think we tend to be super focused on the solution, and as a result, and have like maybe a little confidence or hubris relative to the solution that we take on. But I think it's significantly more important to have a clear definition of the problem or the goal that you're trying to solve. I think understanding the impact you want to have, I think, is another way to look at the problem. If you want to, start a public speaking, I've got friends who are like, hey, I want to help 1,000 people in their leadership journey in the next 5 years. Like, that's the impact you want to have. It doesn't tell you anything about how you're going to do it. You could start by saying, I want to start a podcast and I want to give out worksheets and I want worksheets to lead to coaching and I want coaching to lead to more coaching clients and work that way. And that might fail. Maybe you achieve your goal by having just speaking at one leadership event where there's 1,000 people there and you get 1,000 feedback forms that say, hey, this was great, right? If you think about the impact, it's just the goal. It has no bearing on how you navigate to that goal. But if you have a good guiding post, I call it build from above. Start with the thing that you want. What's the impact you want to have? What's the influence that you want to have? And then once you've locked that down, then you start to open up the solution space. And there's infinitely number of ways I can get there. I can have this impact by speaking on stage, by talking to people, by starting a podcast, by making a movie, documentary, however you want to do it. There's so many different ways to reach people. I had a friend I was talking to a little while ago, and she's had a goal of being, she wanted to work for the US State Department on women's rights around the world. And she was really discouraged by the current administration's, politics and all of that, and then was really just devastated about the lack of opportunity for achieving this goal of hers, and kind of stuck where she is. And I was like, okay, well, because working for the State Department was just one avenue, and so I asked a couple clarifying questions to understand what impact you wanted to have. The goal was work for the State Department, affect women's rights around the world. But you can if you ask the right questions, you can kind of back that up and say, well, why did you want to work for the State Department? Okay, is women's rights more important to you? Or is international women's rights more important to you? Or is working for the State Department more important for you? It's oh, international women's rights. Okay, do you think there's other organizations or other ways you could impact international women's rights by not working for the State Department? She's like, oh, well, I guess so. I never really thought about that. It's well, you could work for a nonprofit, the Gates Foundation. You could find an organization. You could work for the UN, the Global Economic Forum, the World Bank. You can go take a job abroad. You can do Peace Corps. There's all these different avenues once you understand the impact you want to have. And then you start adding these different constraints. You're well, I need to make money. I need to be within 10 hours flying to my family. And then you figure out how to hone in on the solution based on the constraints and the other goals, sub goals you have behind it. But that's not the first step. The first step is the impact, and then understanding all the landscape of how you get there. And that's the elevate your perspective so you can see all the opportunities to get to the impact and influence that you want to have.
That's mic drop moment right there. I mean, that is that's the juice right there, Christopher, on how to approach how to achieve your goals in life. I love that we get, and I'm guilty of that, being so honed in on, I want to achieve this specific goal and I'm going down this one avenue. So I just pour everything I've got into this one avenue when there's so many other directions I could go. And if there is a roadblock in that one avenue, then, I might feel like I'm panicking, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do because this was the path I was supposed to be on. Well, in reality, there are multiple paths, as you suggest, that we could be taking to get to that end goal. But you're saying that the first thing first is define the goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the mindset along the path is radical humility. You have to take care not to believe 100% that you know the path. And so if you're on the path and you're I don't know if this is the right path, but based on the information I have today, this is the best path for right now. And I will continue along this path until I have better information to change the direction. Mm-hmm. But all you can do is make one decision at a time and hope that leads to the next step towards your goal. We need to be able to sense your environment and sense the path. If having regular check-ins with your goals, hey, am I closer to my goal or further away from my goal based on the path I've been on for the last 3 months? Do I even have the right information to know whether or not I'm closer or further away from my goal? What are my blind spots? Do I need to get feedback from outside? Maybe I can't even see whether I'm on the right path because I'm blindfolded where I am and I need someone to tell me where I'm at or get some external feedback. So it's creating these feedback loops and feedback mechanisms to continuously iterate your way to the goal, because you're not going to be able to get there first time perfectly. I remember seeing a video a little while ago of, we're in the age of like AI and robotics, and consider this experiment. It's really been done. Like, how do you teach a robot how to walk like bipedal human motion one step at a time? And so you can do this like algorithmically, essentially like some smart software programmer, like making rules like move hip joint 10 degrees, then move knee joint 5 degrees, then move foot joint, then move head, and then swing back and forth. And you can prescribe one step at a time. And that's going to be really, really hard. Like walking is really complex. It's a very difficult thing to really understand because we've got lots of, we call it degrees of freedom, lots of different things that can move on our body that all support our balance and our stepping and our gait and all that stuff. And then if you do it with AI, like how artificial intelligence learns is truly through failure. It's incentive, like an incentive function. You tell it what to want, and then you give it positive feedback when it does things that are closer to what you want. And so it may try like flailing its arms to try and walk, and you tell the AI, fail. That's not how you walk. It may try like moving its legs a little bit and be like, okay, 1 brownie point, you're a little bit closer to walking. And it tries a bunch of random things. It'll try like wiggling its head back and forth, trying to figure out like what are legs. And the success function, you have to define success for the algorithm. You have to say success is moving your center of gravity from this location to this location in this much time. And maybe it'll crawl, or maybe it'll like roll. It'll figure it out. And then once you get a little bit closer, you say, well, no, you have to use your feet. And so you keep changing the function, but you have to move from here to there. And the way it's going to learn is by figuring out probably 10 million ways to not do it. But understanding what it's trying to do, what the measure of success is, and then having those feedback loops, someone externally saying, yes, no, good, bad, good, bad. This is exactly how you train a dog as well. You give it treats, you give it a little clicker, whatever it is. It's like, okay, that was good behavior, but you do nothing. Sometimes you do nothing for bad behavior. You just incentivize good behavior. And that implicitly tells you what is not good behavior because it's not closer to the goal. You're not getting a treat as a result of these actions. And so it's really interesting to see how artificial intelligence learns, because that's how real intelligence learns. But failure really is the way.
Yeah, as you were explaining that experiment, I'm thinking like, is this not what our brains do organically when we are infants or toddlers learning how to walk? I mean, I feel like that is the exact function that's happening in our brains as we are figuring out how to control our bodies to be able to ambulate around, and what doesn't work and what does work. And you get that positive reinforcement from your parents, and they clap and say good job and all that.
Yep.
Yeah. That is amazing. And I know that relates because you're a father and you have a young one. How many children do you have?
I have 2.
2
kids, 2 little girls.
And so I know that you have been through that and will be going through that process again. Speaking of process, that is one of the words that I want to read off in this quote of yours that I want to ask you about. You say that, and we're kind of shifting into space now. You say that we must go to space, not just for what we'll find, but for who we'll become in the process. What do you mean by that?
I think it's the pursuit of hard things that make us who we are. I like to say it's more about the journey, not the destination. And so personally for me, I've got like really big, crazy goals, and going to space was one of them. But it wasn't necessarily because I wanted to achieve that goal. It was because I wanted to have an interesting path where I would learn things and going back to what I said earlier, continually to push my potential. Like, what is my potential capable of doing? And so I only know that if I'm operating at the surface, like the crest line of my potential. And so I think it's important to push ourselves beyond where we feel comfortable, because again, it's about having that radical humility. I actually don't know what I'm incapable of doing and capable of doing. And the only way I'm going to find out is if I push myself past that. Like, I know you're in the fitness and personal training world. Mm-hmm. Like, you only get growth once you're like lifting heavier weights than you've lifted before, or if you're trying to run faster than you've run before. You don't get growth if you stay within your circle of confidence or comfort zone.
Yeah.
You have to push past your comfort zone if you're going to get growth. Mm-hmm. And if you don't want growth, then don't try and do hard things. But if you want to do something that you've never done before, or you want to do something that no one has ever done before, it is 100% required to do something that no one else has done before, or do things what do things that other people aren't willing to do. And so I think that's why it's important to set an audacious goal. The most audacious goal I think humanity's ever set was, when Kennedy says, by the end of this decade, we will put a man on the moon. Paraphrasing, but
yeah,
so many amazing things have come out of the pursuit of space. Like, we wouldn't be talking today if we weren't GPS and satellites in space and communications and medications and all these different things that have come out of space, the pursuit of space. And so it's like this wake of innovation happens when you do all these hard things. A lot of the reason why America is kind of the dominant economy is because people might not like what I have to say here, but it's kind of true. It's because we pour so much money into defense spending, and there's whole programs of the government to kind of take defense technologies and make them for commercial purposes, and that inspires economic prosperity and creates jobs. And so it's like doing things that are hard by investing in very expensive, very difficult, very lengthy projects because of all of the side effects, sometimes the intrinsic, hard to quantify side effects. Mm-hmm. Like GPS right now is a free resource that is sponsored for the world by the United States government. Like right now, the president could decide, turn off GPS. No one gets it, right? Other countries have GPS satellites as well, but it was kind of a free resource that we all use. And now your Waymo doesn't work without it. Your Uber Eats doesn't work without it. You probably don't even know the neighborhood you live in without it, to be honest. And so there's all these intrinsic benefits by going and pursuing hard things. That's kind of the point.
Yeah. What, in talking more about space, and I'm kind of reeling from you just admitting getting to go into space wasn't my end goal. That was just kind of one of the things I wanted to see if I could do. And I have more audacious goals than that. That is incredible. Which speaks to you as a person, that you are just, you are chasing what other people would think is the impossible. But for you, it's not, because you have not discovered that for yourself yet. Right. And I love that.
Yeah. The world will tell me if it's impossible, but I'm not going to tell myself. So right now it's a possibility. It may not be a probability, but I've got a track record of completing improbable things.
That is awesome. So, okay. So let's talk about the improbable of traveling to space. So just out of curiosity, what is the most memorable part of your journey to outer space?
It's by far seeing the Earth with your own two eyes. We all live on Earth, we can see it, but being able to see the Earth in its context, in its neighborhood. I remember being at the end of the boost phase where the rocket's still burning, and your head's pinned back and you can see out the window, the corner of your eye. And I remember seeing the Earth come into view, because I could see the blackness of space, and I could see this thin blue line that's our atmosphere, all of it. And then I could see this beautiful, blue, brown, grayish Earth with clouds, and we launch over a desert climate. So lots of brown down there too. But I remember seeing the Earth in its context, and I was like, wow, we have left the Earth. I'm aware that we have left the Earth because I can see where the Earth itself is. And that means I have to be at some further third-party perspective to be able to see where the Earth is. And so it's a pretty profound experience, because you've never seen anything quite this large before, this close. You look down, and there's a whole planet beneath you, this giant ball. You can see around the horizon, because the higher you go, the further you can see. That's why we seek the high ground, elevate your perspective. You can see further. Our eyes have this really unique ability to pick up pretty good contrast, especially relative to cameras. And so the Earth is this beautiful, bright ball of light being reflected by the sun. And the space is just this deep, inky, matte black. And the juxtaposition of those two things at the same time is just profound, because you're seeing everything that ever has been, ever was, that we know about came from this ball right below me. And I'm not a part of that right now. And so in a way, it's having a collective out-of-body experience. I was off of the Earth, out of body, looking at myself, our species, our humanity. For one brief moment, there was maybe a dozen people in space, my mission and people on the International Space Station and everyone else that ever has been is on Earth right now. And it was just so surreal. Really humbling to have that elevated perspective and just have like deep humility and a profound connection to the planet and the people. It was really moving. It was, it still continues to like change me and when I talk about it, and it's really just a treat. And I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity I had to experience it.
That sounds incredible. I have to imagine for you to be able to experience that, your journey to get there couldn't have been easy. And I have to imagine that there were multiple setbacks, hurdles, hoops that you had to jump through in order for you to be able to be a part of that program, to be on that mission, to be on that flight, to go to space, to come back. If you had one piece of advice for our listeners and our viewers who may be facing significant setbacks towards their dream, what would it be to help them discover their next version or to help them keep pushing towards their next best self?
I think it's easy to look at other people and assume that they have something that we do not. And I think that's a mindset that I don't adopt. I recognize logically that people have other skills and experiences that I don't have. But I also have skills and experiences that they don't have. And so like, how can you turn your perspective, your experience, your skill set into an advantage? Like there's only one you. It's kind of your job to figure out what only you can do best. And if you're operating in alignment with yourself, then no one can touch you. Like the competition is irrelevant because you're the only you. So I think it's really figuring out what you bring to the table and then how you bring that to the table. I remember when I stepped into a leadership position I didn't feel like I was ready for, and it took me maybe a year and a half to figure out that I had to lead this team differently than the previous leader of this team because I'm not that person. So I have to do it completely differently. And I was super insecure, a lot of imposter syndrome. But I found my way to the same solution, or at least a good enough one, in a different way. And so I think it's what you bring to the table is important. I'll close with this and I'll say, like, I think you make your own luck. I usually have like here it is. I keep a double-sided coin. If there's any like Batman fans out there, if you know Two-Face.
Yeah, sure.
I keep this coin around to remind me that you make your own luck. And that's a quote from Two-Face from Batman. But it's like, what can you do to stack the odds in your favor? Like, it may seem like it's fair, but like, I guarantee you there's other people who aren't playing fair. It doesn't mean you're cheating. It just means you have advantages that other people don't have. It's like, how do you play into those advantages, or how do you go increase your chances? So I worked for a space company that less than 1,000 people. So right off the bat, if they're only sending one person to space, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of me going to space if it was random. It wasn't random. So that means there's things I can go do to go tailor my environment and go get on the radar of the people that had the opportunity to choose who got to go to space. But already like just working in that environment put me like 100 or 1,000 times, maybe even more than that, better odds than anybody else. And so I think the biggest way to control your own luck is to control your environment. The people you spend your time with, the mentors you have, the content you consume, how you spend your time, like all that is your environment. And your environment has a disproportionate impact over your habits, probably more than you realize. I think there's a lot more that we can control that we don't give ourselves credit for. And you just kind of stop making excuses.
Stop making excuses. Another mic drop moment right there. I love that. Well, Christopher, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to thank all of our listeners and our viewers, but I also want to give them an opportunity to find out more about you, more about your experience, more about your journey, and more about what you speak about. So where can our listeners and viewers find out more about the astronaut, the rocket scientist, the speaker, Christopher Huie?
Yeah, thanks. You can find me on online. You can just Google Christopher Huie, astronaut. Usually my website pops up, but ChristopherHuie.com. Also Astro Chewy, so AstroChuie.com. And then on socials, I'm Astro Chewy everywhere. So ASTROCHUIE. And I'm happy to like, really excited to share my message and to teach you and the world how to push past your capabilities, build from above, elevate your perspective, and chase the horizons. Because I think we're all capable of more than we think we are. You just maybe you're missing the framework or those coaching moments to really help you keep moving. But it's the realization that you can do things that other people haven't done, and it just takes work. I've heard the saying, like, it took 10 years to become an overnight success. So you have to put in those first 9.5 years if you want to be an overnight success, and you got to start doing the work today. It's always the best time.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, thank you again for taking the time to be with us today. And again, thank you for all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in. And as we always say, remember to be positive, stay persistent, and know that mindset is everything. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.